Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back. My name is Alex and today I'm going to be breaking down the combat system inside of Gotham Knights. I'm going to be telling you guys everything that you need to know. I'm going to share with you guys all the tips and tricks I've picked up after all my hours playing the game. So if you've been having trouble with the combat, it's kind of confusing, you're not entirely sure what to do or how to tackle certain situations, I don't blame you. The game does a pretty poor job of explaining how things work in the game. So with all that being said, let's get into the guide. Now, first things first, when you pick the game up, the combat is going to feel a little bit slow. It does take some getting used to, and it does take a while to open up, but once you actually unlock all of your abilities, once you understand the enemy's movement patterns, and once you actually learn your character and understand the timing of your attacks, I promise you that the combat is going to improve the more you play the game. Now, touching on the topic of learning your characters, you're going to have 4 heroes to pick from. You have Nightwing, you have Batgirl, you have Robin, and you have Red Hood. And all these characters play completely differently. They all have different weaknesses, they all have different strengths. And even though every character has a pretty unique role in the team, every character is capable of doing big damage, but they all do their big damage in a different way. So just a brief rundown of the actual characters. Nightwing is the most elusive out the bunch. If you're playing Nightwing and you're taking damage, then you're playing Nightwing wrong. You should never be taking direct big damage with Nightwing because he's super evasive and he builds momentum meter the fastest out of any of the characters. So that means you can spam abilities, you can spam his ultimate attack more than any other character, and overall he just has the ability to jump all over the battlefield, do damage, and just keep moving. He's a pretty active character to play. You have to always be on point. And on top of that, a lot of his skills and abilities grant buffs to you and your teammates, so he's more of a leader slash support type character. So if you're looking to play a more active type support character, Nightwing is the way to go. Next up we have Batgirl, who is the tankiest out the bunch. A lot of her skills revolve around her just being able to tank damage and power through enemy attacks. She's really good at close quarters combat. She's also the only character in the game that's capable of hacking equipment. So you can hack enemies, you can make them explode, you can make devices explode and malfunction. But all in all, Batgirl is pretty much all about getting in your face, staying alive, doing a heavy amount of melee damage, while at the same time tanking. So I would classify Batgirl as more of a close range DPS slash tank. Now next up we have Robin. Robin is the squishiest out the bunch. He has the lowest health pool and he takes the most damage when he gets hit. But that being said, he does have the best elemental effect built up in the game, and he also has the best stealth in the game. So I would classify him more as the close range battle mage slash invisible stealth guy. I don't really know how to classify that, but he's good at stealth, he's good at elemental effects, his AoEs are really good, and he's just really good at blowing things up. And even though he takes the most damage, he does have some of the most powerful abilities in the game when it comes to controlling enemies, when it comes to doing damage. So the trade-off is he's squishy, but he does a lot of damage. And last but not least, we have Red Hood, who I would classify as a ranged DPS with really good crowd control abilities. He has the best range attacks in the game, he has the best grab in the game, and a lot of his abilities are just really good at clearing out groups of enemies. And if you're trying to use Red Hood as a melee based fighter, you're using him the wrong way. He is the complete inverse to the other characters. They get their combos from their melee attacks, but with Red Hood, he gets his combos from his ranged attacks. So if you're using Red Hood and you're trying to do combos with his melee attacks, it ain't gonna work. So if you just started up the game and picked the character, but the playstyle doesn't really vibe with you, just try another character out and maybe it'll be a better fit. Now moving on to the actual combat basics. These are things that you're pretty much gonna have to master if you're gonna wanna play the game long term. And most of these will come a time you'll start doing them without even paying attention. And first on the list, and something that I believe is probably the most important thing to actually learn in the game, is your timed attacks. Now these attacks are different for every character, so I won't be going over the actual timed attack timings in this video, but make sure you go to the training area and actually learn your character's timed attacks. Now the benefit of doing timed attacks, they're going to net you more damage, they're going to net you more momentum meter. They have some pretty cool animations if you get them right. And to fully flesh out the combat, you're going to want to start mixing your normal attacks with your timed attacks. So if you've ever seen footage of this game, if you ever watch anybody play this game where they're just doing the same attacks over and over, it's because they're not actually using the combo system. Now moving on to the next tip. Try your hardest. This is something that I still struggle with sometimes, but that is to do not get tunnel vision when you're fighting enemies. I know it's super easy to focus on one enemy, but sometimes an enemy will be attacking you off the screen where you can't see them. Sometimes they'll be on rooftops, and sometimes you just don't have enough time to react to them. So you have to kind of see the whole battlefield at once. Don't really focus on one enemy for too long. And it also helps if you scan out all of your engagements before you actually start. But if you do decide to actually focus down the enemy, make sure you scan the environment. Make sure you look for the drone operators. Those guys are a pain in the ass. If you can take those guys out as quickly as possible, that would make a lot of your fights go a lot quicker. Next tip is going to be a pretty simple and quick one, and I see a lot of people actually don't do this when they're playing, but whenever you're in the middle of combat and somebody starts to take aim at you, you have about 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds before they actually fire. To counter this, all you have to do is use your ranged attack. So if the character is behind you and is off screen, but you see the line behind you, just move your character down, use your ranged attack, and it should knock them out of their animation. Now if it's a drone aiming at you, that's not going to work. You kind of have to get out the way, or you can still attack it. Maybe you will destroy it in time, but it's usually just better to get out the way of the drones. Now in your character's animation speed does play into this. Red Hood, his ranged attacks are pretty much instant, but the other characters have a little bit of wind up in their ranged attacks, and some of them don't go as far as Red Hood's pistols. Now if the line aiming at you is red, the only way you can stop that is to use a piercing attack, but otherwise you just got to get out the way of the red line. And this actually rolls right into the next tip. Whenever you see an enemy using an attack with a red indicator, you can either dodge out of the way or you can interrupt them with the piercing attack. Now the piercing attack is a momentum ability and it is different for every character, so to find out your character's piercing attack, go to your abilities, read through all of your abilities, see which one has the piercing attack on it, and use that whenever you're getting rushed down by an enemy with the red indicator on them. Now moving on to the next tip, we're going to be talking about damage numbers. Now I do suggest that you use the damage numbers at least for the first little bit while you're getting used to the game and you're trying to understand all the mechanics, because the game does have some RPG mechanics and the damage numbers are pretty good indicators of what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. You have the gray damage, which is when you're attacking a character with armor or shields. You're not doing full damage, so the number is gray. Then you have your white damage, which is just your normal damage. Then whenever you crit an enemy or you hit them inside of their weak spot, you get yellow damage. And last but not least, we have the red damage, which only occurs when you use an element that an enemy is weak to. And this goes hand in hand with the next tip, which is something that I see a lot of people struggle with. I watch them play the game. I watch them have a lot of issues with the combat. They're not killing things. And that is, you have to use the right element against the right enemy types. Now, super early game, you can get away with not paying attention to the system, and super late game, once your character is just fully built out and he's just way too powerful for the game to handle, you don't have to worry about the system at all. But anything in the middle, if you're not using the right element types on the right enemies, you're going to have a bad time. Now, when you actually use the right elements against the right enemy types, these act as hard counters to a lot of enemies. So for example, one of the most annoying enemy types in the game is the League of Assassins. Now, if you just try to fight these guys straight up, they teleport all over the place. They hit you, they run, they teleport. It's super annoying, takes forever. But once you implement their weakness, which is fire, by the way, you set them on fire and you take away their ability to teleport as long as they're burning. Now, to find out what all of your enemies are weak to, you want to go to your menu, you want to go to database, and you want to go to profiles. And from here, you can look up all the enemy types. You can see what they're weak to. You can see what they are resistant to. And you can also see what kind of damage they deal, so you can build out your actual character accordingly. Now, for the last tip, we're going to be talking about guard breaks and dodges. Now, there will be some enemies in the game that will avoid all of your attacks. You'll be swinging at them, they're going to dodge, you're never going to hit them. I believe it's called Evade Flurry, and it's an attribute that some enemies have. So that means you can't hit them with normal attacks. So how do you beat this? There are a couple of ways. One, you can use your ranged heavy attack, which is executed by holding down your ranged attack. And this is universal across all 4 characters. They all have the same shotgun effect. Whenever you hit one of the guys that have Evade Flurry, this will knock them on the ground, giving you a chance to either grab them or use one of your momentum abilities. And another way to actually hit these guys is to use AoE abilities. So whatever AoE abilities your characters have, that will work on them. Also, if they're standing next to a barrel, that would also hit them. And once you figure out these guys' movement patterns, once you start to figure out which enemies actually have this skill, you'll be knocking these guys out in no time. Now, moving on to the actual evades that your character has. You have your normal dodge and then you have your perfect dodges. Now normal dodges, they're just normal dodges. You just dodge out the way of certain attacks. And then perfect dodges only occur in pretty close attack windows. So you have to pretty much wait until you're almost about to get hit. The enemy attack indicator will change to look a little bit more spiky. And that's when you know that you're able to do a perfect dodge at that specific time. Now with that being said, the dodge in itself doesn't really have a lot of invincibility frames. So even though you dodge some attacks, you will still get hit. But that's just with the normal dodge. If you're able to actually do a perfect dodge, that has full invincibility. But there's sometimes in this game that no matter what you do, no matter how good you dodge, you're still going to get hit. It just happens. Now last but not least, we got the guard breaks. And this only occurs with the big enemies, the guys with the big shields on them. To break this is pretty simple. Just hold down your attack button to do a heavy attack. And that's it. It breaks their guard. You see like the little symbol pop up of the shield cracked in half. If you've got Red Hood, that's your chance to actually grab them and throw them or attack them. And if you're using other characters, that's your window to actually use your momentum abilities that would not work on them otherwise. Like Batgirl's beatdown skill, that won't work unless you actually break their guard first. And I will say that this is pretty important because those big guys will mess your day up if you're not paying attention to them. So sometimes you just want to break their guard and leave them there just to take them out of the fight for a little bit. And sometimes you want to actually go for the kill. So it just depends on the actual situation. And we finally made it. That was the last tip I have for you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that shenanigans down below. Let me know if you found anything that you didn't know yet. Let me know how you guys are enjoying the actual combat in this game, because the more I play this game, the more I love this combat system and the more I want them to actually make a sequel. But with all that being said, shall I catch you guys next time? Peace.